Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Our Homes, Ending the Housing Crisis. My name is Ryan Catalani, and I'll be your host today. Our guest today is Wayne Kawamura, Senior Auditor at the City and County of Honolulu's Office of the City Auditor. He's been there since 2004 and previously held legislative and policy analyst positions in the Hawaii state government. Wayne's presentation will cover two recent city audits on the Department of Planning and Permitting, or DPP, focusing on the building permitting process and monster homes. We'll also have time for Q&As, in fact, a lot of time, so please feel free to add in your questions anytime using the Q&A tab on your screen. That's the best way for us to sort through all the questions, so feel free to type in anytime you start thinking of stuff. But before we get to that, we do want to get to know you, the audience, a bit better. So we're just going to do another brief poll to let us know how you're involved with housing. This is the interactive part. So if you have Zoom on a small screen, now's the time to open it up again.
Hey, Ryan, the panelists can't vote.
I'll look into that for next time. Just give it another few seconds if you haven't voted yet. All right, thanks everyone. So it looks like just about everyone is either a housing advocate or someone who works on housing issues professionally as an industry professional or researcher, or we have some government staff and officials too. So thanks for letting us know. That'll inform our conversation a little bit and help make these webinars better in the future too. So without further ado, I'm just going to pull up Wayne's presentation and we can get started to the reason you're all here. Okay.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's our pleasure at the Office of the City Auditor to share today our findings on two recent audits that we did on the Department of Planning and Permitting. One on the building permit process and one on the impact of monster homes. I have kind of taken a look at some of the previous podcasts within the series, and we hope that we can contribute the same level of expertise. And I know some of the ones I looked at, like really great expert panels previously, and I know we're not quite as expert, but we hope that we'll be able to share something of value today. So to begin, next slide, please. Today, my agenda, I'll provide you a background, of our office, just to provide some information in terms of who our office is, what our office does, give some background on the two audits, talk about the Department of Planning, what it does, some of the challenges and issues that it faced, and then talk about some of the things that we reviewed during the audit. I'll try to tie them together as much as possible to what are the housing issues raised, and with the time remaining, we can have a discussion, question and answer, as Ryan said. Next slide. So basically about our office, the Office of the City Auditor, I really didn't think about it, but today is actually our 17th anniversary. So our office opened in July 1st, 2003. We are a legislative branch agency that's part of the City Council group. We were authorized by charter amendment by the voters in 2002. One of the major reasons why we exist is because of the Eva Villages fraud, which, as some of you may remember, happened back in the mid-90s, which concerned a fraud perpetrated by two two city workers that were in charge of relocating businesses from the old Eva Sugar Mill site, and they had created basically fictitious moving companies to receive the money, and in the end, most of the businesses weren't moved. So the fraud was for approximately $6 million. I know the two involved were both charged criminally. One went to jail for an extended period of time. But yeah, one of the impetuses behind creating our office was just to have a watchdog to kind of take a look at certain things and to make sure that controls are in place to prevent that kind of misconduct or that kind of fraud from happening again. Now, in terms of our major work is to do performance audits. I know people are more familiar with the term financial audits. It's a little bit different. Performance audits generally concern reviews of city programs, operations, or projects. In the past, we've taken a look at the Hard Rail project, ambulance service, the handy van, recycling, bike projects. Over the past years, we've covered quite a bit in terms of taking a look at those projects, how they're doing, how much they cost, are they doing what's intended, and I'll provide a link to our website where all those previous reports are archived, where if you're interested, you can go take a look at some of the other departments that we've audited in the past. So what we'll look at in terms of our review, we'll look at things about the program or project like economy and efficiency and effectiveness. I guess basically the concept of economy would be something like, was there value delivered for the resources spent? So for the money and time that it took, was there value delivered to the city? We might take a look at what was budgeted, what it cost, how it was spent. I guess our most commonly reviewed series is the Heart series, where we've done four performance audits on various aspects of Heart's operations. Economy could also be viewed like it is with the topic today. So with building permitting. So, it could be viewed as demand, a demand for a particular service and how it is met. And then I know one of the major concerns about the building permit process, or just kind of reading through and monitoring this issue over time, is how to streamline it. Is it the most efficient that it could be? The best way that I can kind of provide an example of how we would look at efficiency would be, I guess, what everybody's familiar with. Kind of going down to the DMV, you got to bring all your documents, you got to line up, you might wait for a long time. And in the end, after waiting for that long time, you may get turned away without what you need. With the current building permit process, there's a number of ways that you can kind of skin the cat. So would it be more efficient if they, did what they did previously, which is have a walk-in system, have people wait to be serviced? Or should it be more like a drop-off system where people just drop off their plans in bulk and get contacted later? Or, or should it be an appointment system, which is kind of the approach that they've taken right now, where you set up an appointment using the city's website, and at that point you can drop off your permits. You can ensure that that they get taken in, the formatting is checked, and you pay your plan review fees. Efficiency is more about how do you for lack of a better term, how do you skin the cat to get to your intended end? The intended end here is to get your building permit issued. The last concept, effectiveness, again, is mainly about getting that building permit issued. So is the result or outcome, is that the intended or the desired one? So in terms of what we looked at here, we're looking at operations at the department where, applications are processed, plans are reviewed for safety and health concerns as well as compliance. And then, what is the process that building permits actually get, issued? Lastly, our office follows professional standards. Our major professional standards is what is called the Yellow Book, not the commercial phone book about the Director of Services, but it is a yellow book of professional auditing standards that's issued by the federal GAO, the Government Accountability Office, and we follow those standards to ensure that that we're independent. Independent in this sense means independent of the administration. So we're not part of the mayor's administration. We're not part of the department. They don't influence what we look at or what we review. We keep that kind of arm's length relationship in terms of the review. We ensure that all our staff on a project would be objective, that they disclose conflicts of interest, we really take a close look at personal biases to make sure that those don't impact our review. We may also look at previous professional work, so previous jobs, like maybe you came from a different department. We don't want you to look at a department that you worked at. We don't want family members to necessarily be, in the case of this audit, contractors. So we try to keep it as objective and as independent as possible. Some of the other standards on competence. Sometimes we may require experts in highly technical areas. Otherwise, we're assessing whether somebody would be able to or has the background to be able to take a look at an area, review it in terms of policies, procedures, and controls, and make appropriate, put together appropriate audit evidence and issue an audit report. Basically all the contents of our report are based on evidence and review criteria. We have very specific standards of evidence, and then we will base our reviews or our testing to make sure things are the way that they should be on criteria. So criteria would be something like, what is the law? What is the rules? We'll compare it to that. What might be the best management practices or professional practices, business practices in the area, and we'll compare it to that. So in a real basic nutshell, we might be looking at first, are there policies and procedures? Are they followed? And then taking a look at things like, okay, so what's causing it not to be followed? Is there a supervision and monitoring? What would be the effect of not following policies and procedures? Or if there's, limited supervision or lack supervision, what would be, what's causing that? What might be the effect of that? Are there erroneous behaviors? What's causing the errors to happen? So we'd be looking at it in terms of that. In terms of the standard of quality control, we're peer reviewed every 3 years by members of the other government shops who just love to come to Hawaii. That's a side note. And they will take a look at our quality control system and our compliance with the government auditing standards. And with respect to every single project that we do, we have an internal quality control review by somebody else who wasn't a part of the audit team that would kind of take a look at the facts, the figures, and the supporting evidence, make sure that everything is set up soundly and reasonably. Just to have kind of like a second set of fresh eyes to kind of look at anything that we put together. That ultimately it is reasonable and it is supported by the facts and the evidence. Lastly, I think what everybody loves about what we do is that we issue audit reports. So so there are standards in terms of how we report the findings. Typically, we will structure the way we write or present our audit report like this. So there will be a statement of a condition, which means, here's what's going on. What's causing it, the cause, and the effect. So what has happened, or what's the result of what's going on? And like I said earlier, it's compared to criteria. So it's compared to what should be. And in the end, we will be, if we can determine what is causing it, we'll do a root cause analysis. We determine what is causing it. Then we'll be recommending improvements based on the causes identified. And the recommendations try to address the causes of identified problems. This is not, I guess it's not done in a bubble. Management is a part of the process throughout. So at the reporting, I guess in the very beginning, we'd be notifying them. We'd be saying, you know, we're going to come in and audit you about this topic. We'll go through with them, get familiar with the background of the agency. Some of its challenges and issues, some of its, you know, policy and procedure structure, some of its, you know, what are its ultimate aims, you know, how it measures its performance and things like that. And in the end of that process, write up, you know, what our audit objectives are, or what, you know, what we intend to review about the program. We then put that in a letter and send it back to the management. We would then engage in field work, which is our review, our substantive review of operations and results. And then in the end, we'd come up with this thing called preliminary findings, and come up with a discussion draft, which we would, you know, provide a copy to management to have a discussion about, you know, can you help us correct any factual errors that you might see are here in this draft report? Can you provide us with additional clarifying or explanatory information? And then it's an opportunity to discuss and clarify findings and at least the preliminary findings and conclusion. In the end, management is provided.
Not sure if that's from our end.
Okay.
But Wayne, do you want to just jump to some of the results for the sake of time?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So next slide. So basically, where the two audits came from was that the City Council requested our office to conduct performance audits on the Department of Planning and Permitting. The first one in Resolution 18284 CD1 FD1 conduct an audit of the process of reviewing building permits. And that one resulted in City Auditor Report 2001. The other one was Resolution 18223 FD1, which is to conduct an audit of the permitting and inspection of large detached dwellings, which people commonly know as monster homes, and that resulted in Report 19-3. Next slide. So in terms of the Department of Planning and Permitting, they're responsible for the city's long-range planning and community planning efforts. They administer and enforce various permits, as you can see on the slide. In these areas, the ones that we particularly looked at in our audits were the ones pertaining to building construction and city standards. And then they're organized into 8 functional areas, although our audit is primarily focused on the permits issuing branch and the building division. Next slide. So some of the major concerns, I think if you're part of this webinar, you kind of know them well. So there were problems with obtaining building permits for construction, renovation, and repair of single family and 2-family dwellings. You know, there were comments and complaints in the public, the business community, and among the council members that it takes, you know, way too long to get building permits reviewed or issued. Plan review deadlines are rarely met. The customer experience is really poor. People can't determine where the status of their permit is. Processing times are too long, so how can you reduce them? How can you streamline the process some more? How can applicants receive more information on where their applications are? So the council did take 2 actions. They're listed there. The major one, which we actually did look at in terms of effectiveness, is the council passed a 60-day expedited review program called the OTR 60, which is a one-time review of permits for single-family and 2-family dwellings. Next slide. Yeah, the department issues in general fall into 5 categories, as we saw. There were some staffing issues. There were issues with customer service and technical review. There are expanding code requirements. There are external reviews that are required prior to a building permit being issued, and the department is dealing with a legacy permitting system that was very old. So in terms of staffing, the department has a problem with vacancies, and they have a problem with having their reviewers have enough technical background. So what they have dealt with in the past is initially they turned their focus more to customer service in 1998 when DPP got started, and that would be similar to have greater human touch, have less bureaucracy. So you'll have fewer outright rejections, you have less denial of service, even if warranted. The department will work with you, in terms of trying to get your building permit. Now, obviously, this has implications. I'll discuss them in a few slides. And then generally, they were having problems with attracting plan reviewers with appropriate technical review experience. I guess this kind of runs into that chicken and the egg problem of, only government work yields the appropriate government work experience. So how can you get government experience if you don't work in the government? So what they've been trying to do is they've been trying to get internships, and they've been trying to switch the positions away from customer service to emphasize more of the technical review aspect of the job. What we did find that kind of stood out was that we took a look at some similar jurisdictions: Portland, Pierce City, Washington, which Tacoma is part of, Clark County, Nevada, which Las Vegas is part of, San Jose. And we found that DPP is the only one that doesn't really require plan reviewer licensing or plan examiner certifications, and it also provided the lowest pay range while providing comparable services. So we recommended the DPP kind of take a look at that so that you can address some of its technical review issues and some of its staff retention or attraction of staff problems. I think one of the things that the department really reflects on as being a problem is that they're expanding and changing code requirements that they have to review for. So you're saying back in 1978, it was a little pamphlet before, and now we're talking about a rollaway bookshelf full of codes that somebody will have to go through to review building plans. That's kind of the nature of that one. Coordinating external reviews. So there may be times when before they issue the building permit, you might need to get Board of Water Supply review. You may need to get sewer review. You may need to get, if it implicates a school, you may need to get DOE impact reviews, water quality, traffic impact. And basically DPP would be, or building code approval would be the last review and sign off. So I think there's some angst that's directed at DPP above that, but sometimes it actually is getting external reviews signed off on before they can finally issue the building permit. And then the legacy permitting system, basically it's an old system from 1998, and it's not really structured as an enterprise resource or decision support system, meaning that the data that is generated by all their operations and collected, it can't be used to improve decision making or identify problems with processing or issuing permits. It actually requires a specific kind of search, a specific kind of ad hoc or as needed, just in time kind of reporting. It's not generated as a dashboard necessarily. It's not generated so that it's usable by supervisors immediately, so you can say, okay, here's where the bottlenecks are. We need to work on this now, or some of that is still very opaque, I think, to the decision makers at DPP. Next slide. In terms of workload, you can kind of see it here in big overview. 75% of building permit transactions are for, or applications are for single family and two family dwellings. The vast majority of those are for additions, alterations, and repairs of an existing building, so not new. And then, going through, you can kind of see how it additionally breaks out. Also in the commercial, dealing with additions, alterations, or repairs. Next slide. And then in terms of the trends, all the trend information is listed here. Basically overall, if you get outside of the areas and look overall in terms of applications, the permit applications are in decline in the 5-year period we reviewed. So fiscal year 2014 to 2018, declining by 20%. The demand applications for service, and then down by almost a quarter in terms of the building permits issued. One of the things that we thought was unusual, however, was that despite this declining trend from year to year, there was always a gap between applications and permits issued. Now, I think most people would say, like, well, this generally isn't a problem, because you wouldn't expect that every application would get a permit. However, I think the way that it's administered here, the vast majority of applications will get a permit. It's way over 90%. And I'll discuss a little bit about that in a few minutes. And then there's a rise of third-party review, which is basically the city will certify and register third-party reviewers who can also plan review or code review, and this would be regarded as an equivalent service to DPP actually doing it themselves. And recently, the mayor and the administration have included this as part of their plan to use third-party review services to increase permit processing. Next slide. So this is our best attempt at trying to quantify what the DPP permitting process is. Basically, all the applications go in and are taken in the same way, whether residential or commercial. The ones that concern single family or two family are called category 1. Category 2 through 5 are commercial and are based on value. And then it'll go through these generic steps. All of them will go through these general steps. Pre-screen, where they will look at formatting, stamping approvals, identifying the building codes or the plumbing codes, electrical codes that are involved by the work, and the payment of the plan review fee, which is 20% of the building costs. And then it'll go to external reviews, which I talked about a little bit earlier. These additional reviews by other regulating authorities that need to be done before the building permit is issued. And then lastly, the internal reviews. So additional code specific reviews by DPP or inside reviewers. The commercial ones are done by in-house engineers. The residential ones are viewed by building code division personnel. Land use is reviewed for zoning compliance. If all their approvals are granted, the permit is determined to be ready for issue, and there's a payment of the fee. And at least for the commercial side, there's time limits for the plan review based on value, which can range from 7 to 42 days. Next slide. In terms of our audit findings, the two major findings was that DPP doesn't effectively manage the building process for timeliness. So timeliness really isn't a factor. So we're asked kind of like to determine, okay, so why isn't it timely, or how can it be more timely? Currently, it's not managed for timeliness. The current objective is to issue permits. If you look at the rules, which come from actually about approximately 40 years ago, it actually does say to do it timely and to administrate it to the public good. So what the department is emphasizing to us is that the main point of doing this review is that it's about public health and safety. That's the primary review consideration. So not necessarily timeliness. They have a standard in the 1978 rules which they still use. So plan reviews are supposed to take 2 days. After that review, it's returned to the applicant. Please make these corrections and resubmit it to us so that we can review the revision. That's supposed to take another day. So it contemplates being in DPP's hands for 3 days. And in terms of what we could review, in terms of what DPP does, in terms of their time, we found that only about a quarter complies with this 2-day review requirement, and that's because plans will go through multiple review cycles. So from what I just said, it's just intended to get a one-time review, a second review for revisions, and it's supposed to be issued after that. But instead, it goes through multiple review cycles. There's extended review times, and then this creates application backlogs and excessive delays. As I covered a little bit earlier, so 90+% of building permit applications will receive a building permit. This is an aspect of the department's approach to customer service. And then, but compared to what other jurisdictions tend to do, I found one building permitting municipal source that said, it would be great if people could get up to just 60%. So we're doing really fantastic in Hawaii. I mean, but the inefficiency part is that we're carrying around permits that probably should be rejected or should be revised and resubmitted. So in terms of overall time, on average, we found that it takes about between 108 days and 135 days to issue a permit. Um, the second thing, that the council's program in terms of OTR 60 that I talked to earlier, we found that it doesn't expedite permits for single and two family homes. And we found that based on our discussions, there was limited builder participation. Some felt that it would be risky to participate. First, because it had like a two strikes and you're out rule. Like if you had plans rejected in the previous year, then you couldn't participate. The other one was that if ultimately it is approved via this expedited system, and then you catch a notice of violation, you'd have to correct it in the construction within 30 days, and that's a really short period of time. So they just viewed it as possibly difficult and not practicable. And the applications that we did review, they didn't comply with the requirements. It was a lot of them were supposed to be submitted electronically. Most of them were submitted paper and accepted. It's supposed to be, you go through the one-time review. If you reject it, the whole application is rejected. But some were converted to regular review service. So it again, it's that continuation of this carry-on kind of effect. Next slide.
Sorry, while we're still here, there are two questions that might be pertinent. So why do so many plans go through a multiple review process?
It can be about formatting. In other words, there might not be an indication on the plans, like what are the applicable codes that we're following. It could be a matter of say the size of the dwelling, like it's in the side yard, it's in the setback, it's in the backyard, so it's not appropriately sized, it's not appropriately, like it's too tall or things like that. From talking to the business community, some of them reflect, they go like, well, DPP is really just after perfect plans, rather than perfect construction. So I think depending on who you talk to, they have a different kind of perspective on it. There's also an aspect of DPP trying to be a little bit more protective to applicants and say like, well, your plan should not go right now, because if we try to do it, you're going to catch a violation. It's going to cost you more to correct it down the road when you're trying to construct it and you have a crew there, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's.
The other question, how many types of projects are eligible for an expedited review?
Right now, there's like a older version of one-time review. It's a very limited scope of projects. The one that's currently in play is, again, this on the OTR 60, about permits for single and two family review, and also ADUs, so accessory dwelling units that people build if they're able to rent. It's basically those two are the expedited reviews, so it has to be done in 60 days.
All right, thanks.
And in terms of the recommendations, we found, they're all kind of listed here, and they've all kind of been discussed already. The tilt toward the customer service is leading to some inefficiencies. Like even though you're alohaing them, like you're creating a backlog for everybody else. There's no need for excessive plan review cycles. If it's non-compliant or if it's non-feasible, then it should be rejected and rethought and brought back again. And then just certain issues where they can actually try to streamline their operations, improve their performance. It could be helped by improving their information systems, using data that they collect from their operations, and then training their staff and making sure that they're certified so that they do actually have the technical capability to review appropriately and quickly. Next slide.
One question that might be applicable here. This has to do with the third-party review or permit expediters.
Okay.
If DPP was functioning to most everyone's satisfaction, arguably there would be no need for those services.
Okay.
So, the fact that many use expediters speaks to DPP's, this is the question, speaks to DPP's failure to work expeditiously. If most everyone is using expediters, where is the value?
I think the value is in the expediters that we took a look at tend to make the claim that they can do it faster, that they have the expertise to kind of carry it through the system. So they'll actually meet with DPP on appointment. They'll do all these all these extra value things beyond plan review to try and get to try and get permits through. It just amounts to expert service and somewhat of a guarantee that it can be done faster than DPP. Although in our review we found that it wasn't so. It took as long, and sometimes in the end DPP won't approve what they see. They feel like they need to review it again, so it creates a second layer of review.
Okay, thanks. Go to the next slide.
Okay, the second audit that we covered was the monster homes. Now, a lot of the issues covered were about, are these humongous apartment-sized homes? Are they legal? Are they illegal? Is there some monkey business kind of going on in inspection and permitting? Are bribes happening? Is there corruption? Like, how is this even possible? I took a look at it today for these purposes from housing issues. So it's kind of like, why, so who are these apartment-like dwellings being built for? Often it would be a tear down of old single-family homes in communities like Kalihi and Kaimuki that are replaced by large dwellings that take up maximum space on the lot. So they'll really not match. So there'll be, all this old inventory of homes, and then there'll be this humongous one that, has 24 bedrooms and 23 bathrooms. And often the monster homes will try to maximize the use of the lot. So they'll often be built with ohana units and accessory dwelling units where they're entitled to. We covered accessory dwelling units a little bit earlier. So those are entitled to that expedited 60-day review. Administratively, the mayor and the administration are pushing the development of accessory dwelling units as a way to increase rentals for housing inventory. And basically you'd be building a separate small dwelling on your property to rent. It tends to be about 800 square feet or less. And there's a residential requirement. So in terms of the tenure, the covenant requirement is that you need to rent for a 6-month period. So it cannot be a short-term rental. I guess that's one of the concerns that is being made for vacation rentals, or it's made for other short-term rentals that are illegal. If you do have an accessory dwelling unit, the law says you have to rent for 6 months or more. Ohana units are basically tied to this other concern about, like, well, if you talk about monster homes, like, are you talking about big homes? And I might need a big home because, my daughter and their family needs to move in, or I need to move grandpa and grandma in because they can't live on their own, things like that. So we have a history in Hawaii about, multi-generational homes for family. DPP has standards as to what constitutes a family. Ohana units are attached to the dwelling, so they're not freestanding. Could be an extra room or, a second floor. And it must be occupied by a family member. So these are kind of like the housing issues with that. Next slide. Yeah, and that's all I have. Open up for discussion, question and answers, or any comments.
Thank you for putting that together. Maybe we can share the slides with others.
Okay, yeah, sure.
We did have a couple of questions while you were talking, so thank you for those and keep sending them in. First one, low-income multifamily projects valued well over $10 million experience an 18 to 24-month permitting process. The long processing time can affect interest rates and the financial viability of the project. In a housing crisis, shouldn't there be a special emphasis on processing permits for low-income housing?
Yeah, okay, so as I stated earlier, in terms of the position of our offices, we have to remain independent of the management or of the mayor or even council in terms of what it might decide in terms of what policies to push, what they ultimately decide to implement. I understand the frustration with that. That would be a policy question that council or the mayor might be able to undertake to to try and prioritize, processing those, or, shortening review times. Basically trying to cut the criteria or some of the red tape, in order that it could get out fast, and it could get a building permit so it could be shovel ready much quicker than 18 to 24 months.
Thanks. Can you talk just briefly about whether these audits have been effective, or if there have been any improvements since then?
Okay. Typically, we have an official follow-up program. We'll follow up with the different departments in terms of what they do, and do an in-depth follow-up review within 3 years of the audit being issued. What I have seen in the short term in terms of what DPP has done is, one of the things we took them to task over was, they don't really provide a lot of information in terms of people how to navigate their website. Their website's really opaque, would be not user friendly, would be like, it has a lot of information, but it doesn't give you the information you might need for your particular question. So what I've noticed is they have provided a little bit more information and guidance, like in terms of things like, well, what kind of permits could you get online? So you don't have to come down and file with us, get an appointment or whatever. Those would be things like, like solar, electrical, plumbing. You could just apply, pay, and print, at your computer today. So they've kind of tried to point those things out, and they've tried to provide it a little bit more information. The more long-term things, I think the horizon is maybe, 6 months to 2 years, like, changing their information technology, or, changing their training to get more people certified may actually take a while. But yeah, I think the earlier questioner had a point that, there could be administrative priority placed on different kind of things that just kind of put more emphasis in certain areas where you could get certain ones out more quickly. And those are certainly possible for them to do in the short term.
Great. So the audit, I believe, looked a little bit at what other cities or other municipalities, like you mentioned, are doing.
Yes.
There's a question about, since in other places there are building permit processes that achieve the same goal of ensuring buildings are in compliance with various building codes, do you think the audit should have examined how Honolulu's process compares with those others?
Okay, we took attached as an appendix to our audit. We have categories, and we took a look at six different jurisdictions in terms of what they do, how they're certified, what their approaches are. I think basically what we found is that there's a difference of what each building department is responsible for. Like in certain depending on the jurisdiction, in certain cities, counties, or states, they will actually handle the permit of certain things. So I talked to one of my colleagues at King County, which Seattle is in, and I said, well, how do you guys do building permits? And they go, well, we don't do building permits. Seattle does the building permits. I talked with other, with some of my other colleagues, and they go like, well, we don't do plumbing, or we don't do electrical. That might be a state thing. So some of them, it's more, the responsibilities are more scattered. So DPP actually does a lot. So some of it may actually be just the way that they staff it. So a lot of them will require engineers actually on the desk as intake clerks to actually do a more thorough review. All those different approaches, and that information is attached as an appendix to the report if anybody's interested in reading more about like what other programs do. We were tasked more with just taking a look at what the building permits are, and how could it be streamlined. Looking at other jurisdictions as, I guess, resources in terms of what would be good practices for Honolulu to consider, and then we could recommend from there. But we can't, for our office's purposes, we don't mandate that. That's a management kind of decision or a policy decision.
I guess this is sort of related, but another question is about how a lot of places across the country have, and you mentioned, a more minimal plan review process and focus on compliance via inspection,
Right.
which puts the responsibility on the designer and the builder. Um, did you consider, at all why this wouldn't work here, or, what are the trade-offs of that they considered?
Um, I think again, I can't speak precisely for the department, but I can kind of tell you what their feedback was. So one of the major jurisdictions that's held up as an example by the builder community in particular is that of Pierce County in Washington, and they say that okay, so they had a really screwed up building permit process that took really long and all this kind of stuff. And they made all these improvements, so they've come down and had discussions with our local BIA and other business interests about how improvements could be made. This is what we did. This is what we did, etc. And I guess when we looked at it in comparison, yes, it does apply more technical review. So there's opportunities for it to be faster just by having more technicians kind of look at it and participate in the plan review. It's actually, they have much less volume in terms of the amount of permit applications coming through. The other thing that I think is, I don't know, it seems controversial to me, being a resident here, but a lot of things are a la carte, charge for service. When we're talking about like what the mainland jurisdictions tend to do, so they will charge you a per hour fee, to meet and to do these meetings and to do the plan reviews. Some of this here would be just built into the building permit fee itself. Yeah. So, it would be more obvious what the charges would be. Like, would this make people more serious in terms of, submitting, adequate plans? I think absolutely. But again, it would be kind of a shocking price tag, I think, too. So, there was some of that aspect when we looked at that kind of issue.
Great. This is about the Monster Homes audit. Do you know how many staff DPP has to inspect these, so-called monster homes to ensure they're following the rules? Because the question asks, in communities closer to our beaches like Kailua, it seems obvious that vacation rentals are the main purpose.
Okay, so I guess this is going to kind of sound like a glass half empty, glass is half full kind of answer. They have about 12 building inspectors. So the building inspectors are generally, I don't want to say tied up, but they're generally doing their primary job, which is to inspect building permit construction. So the enforcement type reviews could be done by these building inspectors. They could be done by the housing code inspectors, or the ones who inspect for use, so land use. So all those things about vacation rentals and that are not construction related would be inspected by a different group. But then they don't regularly monitor. They only would go out and inspect if a complaint comes in. So the complaint would have to come into the department. What we found during our review was that if you complain to the mayor, if you complain to the city council, or if you complain to some kind of political representative, your complaint got serviced faster. Whereas if you went through the city's complaint lines or their complaint emails, it didn't necessarily get the same kind of level of attention. I think generally I would say the way the profile looks is it's not enough staff to do a regular monitoring. It is enough staff to do complaints. It isn't enough staff if you get repeated complaints and no violation. So if you keep sending an inspector out because there's suspicion that something might be going on, but they're not finding anything, then that would necessarily stop them from being able to look at something else where something may be going on. So basically, not enough staff, didn't do it with regularity. It's triggered by complaints. So if you do have problems with that, please complain. And the secret to that, I think, is please complain to your council member or mayor because for some reason it gets responded to faster.
We have a number of questions about sort of next steps or where DPP goes from here. So I'll try to consolidate the major
Okay.
questions. Did the audit have an estimated cost or time frame to correct the deficiencies? That's one area.
Yeah.
Will there be a follow-up audit to measure improvement? And what does your audit suggest would be the most effective area of to improve on immediately if, say, you had $10 million today to improve something in DPP?
Okay. So I know that some council members have kind of taken the ball and run with it and said like, okay, so we should divide DPP into two separate organizations because it's too big and it's not effective at doing some of the major things. So break up permitting and planning, and I think there's a bill that's out for discussion in council. Has been sent out to the public to take a look at. Um, I think they've tried to have hearings on it, but they haven't had a full-throated hearing on it. So uh, they took our audit to mean, well, we could possibly split it up and hopefully achieve efficiencies that way. In terms of what could be short-term solutions, like if I had $10 million, it seems like they could use information technology a lot better in terms of handling their information and then turning that information around in terms of, okay, so how are we performing? Yeah, so using information technology for measurement, and information technology for keeping members of the public or applicants in the loop. Um, that would probably be, one of the best ways to deal with it. Just kind of try to find ways in which information technology could result in more synergy. So they may still be understaffed and things like that, but there's some things that possibly use of information technology would make it a little bit more efficient or effective or be more responsive to what the public wants or what the public needs in this area.
And does your office have any plans for follow-up from your audit?
Okay. Yeah. So we have a regular follow-up plan. So within the next 2 or 3 years, we're going in again and taking a look at how they've approached, some of the risk areas that we identified, and take a look at what they might have done in some of the areas where we recommended improvement. So that will be a substantive review. And beforehand, if it goes totally south, I mean, there's nothing written in concrete that says we're gonna let them have 2 or 3 years. Like we could go in before then, or council could be just fed up, throw up their hands and go like, look at it again. They've done that with Hart 4 times with us, so there's other triggers, I guess.
We have a couple more questions we'll try to get
Okay.
through in the next few minutes.
Okay.
So DPP, this is the question. DPP has already privatized many functions like third-party review, private special inspectors. Why have the DPP building division at all? Why not let those other entities handle this role?
Ooh, it's a policy question, isn't it? That's for people that get elected, not like people like me. um, yeah, I mean, philosophically, that's always the question, right? When crises seem to happen, like you look at very extreme ends of the pendulum. So, right now with the police, you go like, well, why don't we defund the police? Yeah, I think in the permitting area that would be the same thing. Um, so I think what we're hoping that would happen is that we gave a look at this primarily of the permitting process, showed where some of the hangups are, and hopefully DPP can use it as a roadmap um, to do corrections and to implement some improvements. As well as what their priorities are, as well as do what their priorities are right now, which are, also a few things that they feel will actually be responsive to improving the permit process.
Thanks. So I guess that leads to one of the other questions people have been asking, which is, if DPP can't make adequate progress in improving itself, are there things that should be on the council to do?
Um, so one of this is kind of interesting. So one of the internal frustrations at DPP goes like this, is that they feel that they're not, adequately consulted about what council wants to do. So council might pass this regulation, they may disagree with it, and council may ultimately pass it, and they'll feel that it's imposed on it. It doesn't stop them from adhering or following it. They will follow the law, but it will result in kind of bogging down their other operations. So like, we talked about monster houses a little bit before. So again, when the primary function of these guys kind of to look at building construction, and you tell them, okay, so today I want you to look at also whether what they're constructing is illegal. Like, could it be turned into a vacation rental, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, council can be a part of it. I think there just needs to be more informational intake, more discussion between all the stakeholders. So DPP and the business community, DPP and the residents, the council and the residents. Kind of, it sounds like I'm suggesting another task force or something, but that'll study and do nothing. But I mean, you really need a lot of these issues are multifaceted, and you really need to get everybody's opinion. You can't just say like, well, we're going to resolve it by sticking this other regulation. It may actually, pressurize operations right now where they will be less effective in responding. That would be the other side.
Yeah, thanks. I think this will be your last question, but I'll share your contact info at the end for others. And I realize this is going to be a big question. So if you have a brief thought on, should the audit have taken a broader look on the organization of DPP and the difficulty of combining all these different functions, planning, zoning, enforcement, and permitting into one agency? And, did you consider at all whether a solution might be to separate some of those functions?
Okay. So actually, all of these functions weren't combined in the past. They were all kind of separate. So DPP was part of a citywide reorganization in 1998. Previously, some of the functions in DPP were part of a Department of Permitting, were part of a Department of Land Utilization, were part of a Department of Public Works, and all this kind of stuff. I think one of the things that we found through the history of our office is that particular reorganization was half-baked. So things were kind of put together without rhyme or reason. It was just kind of like, okay, so here's what the map looks like, put this together. Certain groups go, you took all the engineers. Certain groups go, we don't have engineers. Certain groups go like, well, how can we count on you for support? Well, I'm too busy to give you support. Again, ultimately, I would stop at, well, some of this is ultimately a policy decision. And so some of it does require the department currently constituted to kind of think of, like, if that is a direction they want to go in, reorg, or council wants to mandate a reorg. Actually, I think only the executive department can make it happen. So only the mayor can kind of reorg. But council wants to be the one that's approving that reorg. There'd have to be discussion about the interest, discussion about how operations run, et cetera, et cetera. It would be a very lengthy discussion. So from an audit perspective, it's that kind of question is very difficult to review because it wasn't put together in a neat and orderly way. I guess that's the way that I would answer it. So it's hard to review it in a neat and orderly way. It ends up with many policy questions, which I don't have input into, and are properly for the management or for the mayor, for the council.
Well, thanks for answering so many complex questions in such a streamlined way. And we can provide links to the full audits and your presentation. Thanks again, Wayne, for joining us. Wayne's email is wkawamura@honolulu.gov. You can contact him with other questions you might have. And before you leave, as you leave, I'm just going to put up this quick anonymous survey to let us know what you thought and if you learned anything today. Is there anything else, Wayne?
Oh, no, that's all. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this discussion. Thanks for letting us present what we found in our audits, and please continue this discussion of issues. I find it very helpful. I've listened to some of the other ones. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again to everyone watching. Thanks again, Wayne, and we'll see you at the next edition of Our Homes Ending the Housing Crisis.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Wayne.